Turns out he's a major cinephile. They don't watch enough movies! It's a very simple formula! And here we go. Hello. Welcome to me saying movie words right at you. In the vein of being stuck in this COVID world for almost a year now, and wanting to get back to my roots of more zombie movie TV show content, I've been waiting to do this episode for weeks, but finally, it is here. 28 days and 28 weeks later, the virus duology. We may be in a pandemic now, but at least we don't have zombies yet. Bum bum bum. But with The Walking Dead Season 10 picking up again very shortly to boot, it's time for these amazing films to be discussed on this burgeoning horror podcast. So enough chit-chat before y'all get brain dead. I might even have used that joke a few weeks ago, so I swear I'll give it a break. Eventually. But it's time for the episode to start, so away we go. So I saw 28 Days Later a few weeks ago, and I knew I wanted to talk on these at some point. So I quickly bought a 2-set DVD on Amazon for mad cheap and was ready to go. This movie has in a ton of Nolan films and one of the most anticipated on my personal Netflix shows to watch list after I finished Dark and Gritty Sabrina, in Peaky Blinders, Cillian Murphy. It also has Brendan Gleeson in so many things he's good in. Mad-Eye Moody in the Harry Potters. He's in Gangs of New York. He kills it in everything he's in. And Naomi Harris, who has been a standout in all of the newer Daniel Craig Bond movies and will be in No Time to Die whenever that time the movie eventually drops for me to watch it. Cough, cough. Right now, please. Cough, cough. Like many a pandemic movie before, things here in one ourselves feel all too real. But unlike things being made now, it clearly wasn't trying to get in on the main things going on in the world. It just is a really strong, amazing zombie movie with a different enough take on how it happened. They dressed it up a bit with being a rage virus instead of a zombie virus or T-virus or however you want to classify your crazy making people want to eat other people or whatever pandemic sickness thing. But the end result is the same. Zombies that they are, less skin falling off and, they're not they're coming for you, Barbara zombies. It's mad science gone wrong 101. But even the how of animal rights activists kind of militarized trying to save test subject animals is how it gets unleashed onto the world. I don't always like the how or why or the insight, deep knowledge of science of how exactly the zombie viruses came about in most of my zombie movie. But here it's a unique enough take on the tried and true, so, I dig it. One warning before we get too far into this. The video quality, especially the night scenes, it's not the best in the world here. It was shot that way intentionally. It's not Game of Thrones, that one episode that was too dark where no one could saw anything that was going on. They wanted to film this on low-grade cameras, and this was to add a sense of intimacy, and I don't want to say it's the found footage thing, because it's definitely not that, but kind of making it all feel very ingrained as opposed to watching things happen on the high quality visuals that your eyes can't even process at the time, like that one camera they always use for the hero shots in the playoff games this year. It may be a bit annoying or jarring to start the quality, but I don't mind it really, especially compared to the nausea-inducing shaky camera of Cloverfield, especially since I foolishly took a front seat for an opening night for that movie. Now, there were only 3 seats available. This was way back in the day when you couldn't just reserve your seats like I used to always do. Gosh, remember movie theaters? Every time it gets me. Shout out to Cookie Dough Bites, that candy, that glorious movie dough candy. Yeah, they gave me a shout on Twitter. I'm not going to say I've made it big time yet, but that's a pretty big deal. So, Cookie Dough Bites, I see you and your social media team. Mad ups to y'all. But back to the harrowing story at hand. The theaters, going to the front seat, you like the idea as a kid. Look, the first time I saw a movie in front row seat, I made my dad front row it for Bug's Life. Great movie, not a great time in the front seat. Maybe I didn't notice that as a kid, but Cloverfield shaky camera in the front seat, terrible time. But this camera work here, it's not that. you get used to it, and it's not just the shakiest thing in the world. Just a little bit of a dip in quality of what you may be used to in 2021. You may notice some similarities to The Walking Dead and the open here. This came out in 2002, and the comics for Walking Dead started a year later in 2003. Yes, they are different, but the tone overall is shared here. And this movie did serve as the revival to the modern zombie genre. The Dawn of the Dead remake, Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland, and many, many more are all a thing and in popular culture. Some might say oversaturated. I don't say that yet, but some might. And all that is because of this movie, and to a lesser degree, the Resident Evil movies, which we talked about on the first episode of Season 2. If you really want some double dosing of zombies, you can always check that one out after if you have not already. But that movie, that had its own success based on its own thing, with whole video game film adaptations being the most successful of the video game adaptations to cinema. But as we've said previously, the video game adaptation is going full steam ahead in 2021 and beyond. Hopefully we get some positives from here. One day I'll rewatch that Assassin's Creed movie and see if I still am iffy about it at best, because that cast list is pretty good, and Gleason's in that as well. So I'll check a look at that one day. But the first 1 to 2 of those Resident Evil movies, you can clearly see some inspiration similarities when you watch both 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, especially the first one there. And I would actually argue more so for both of those, get a little more inspiration, even though it came out later in 28 Weeks Later, being both more action-oriented, where the first one, the one that we're talking about in this moment, is more cerebral and small-scale and intimate. But like those zombie projects we like here, it's a slow burn that has action. But seeing the abandoned London streets in apocalyptic fashion, and the music, and just how empty everything is with Killian walking about, it really does put you in a place of feeling isolated, something that sadly we can all relate to more so than normal these days. It does not say or do more than it has to, but crafts a marvelous tale of isolation, survivalism, and still feels super realistic. And maybe that helps having a rage virus instead of a zombies crawling out of the ground thing. And there are some really good scares here without feeling super cheap, which is something I value apparently when talking the horror slasher genres in general. The dialogue is not the most important thing in this movie, and there is a ton of showing and not telling or relying on narration. Visual storytelling is at a prime here, and man does it work well. That's storytelling 101, folks. When I took my first script writing class, show don't tell. I'm sure we've all heard it. This movie does that amazingly. The really nice thing here that makes it all better and even more realistic is our main character. He's just some random guy. He's not a survivalist. He's not a military guy. He's not armed to the teeth with his own band of mercenary buddies. He's just some guy who's happened to be left alone in the world. And yes, it's eerily similar to how Walking Dead starts, with him waking up in a medical place and having to sort his way out through everything. But, even then, that guy, he has some, not military experience, but, he's used a firearm. You see him use a firearm in the TV show before the pandemic zombie virus hits aplenty in full force. So you give Rick Grimes a little edge in the prepared realm here, which is why I like this, though. And he's not waiting on a family that he's going to immediately see or anything. When he meets people along the way, it's just bonding over the crazy circumstances, and the relationships are built just based on what's happening and how they kind of have to happen, based on necessity more so. Some of the set pieces may not have crazy expenditure of ammo or be the most beautiful, cinematically CGI loaded things like who knows how many more Avatars they have coming, at least 4 more. But no movie can match the intimacy of this movie and how it really throws you into this brutal world and just lets you sit and marinate in all that. The writing, acting, and cinematic filmography is second to none, and the small cast really works well here. Only by the end have we met more than a handful of characters. The emotions here aren't just fear or scares or gore either. Because it is so intimate, the emotional stakes are woven into the story and inseparable. It makes you feel things. When our lead Jim finds his dead parents, and yeah, he was kind of looking for them, but not to the same way where you were very aware that Rick was going to meet Lori and Carl at some point. You kind of were very acutely aware that was going to happen. Here, when he meets them, they're dead. And like the sadness you feel in that moment, having never met his parents, only briefly getting to know him as the movie goes. Like there's this note and they wrote him, and I didn't cry, but you're like, it hits you right in the gut. His raw emotions and acting chops are on display, and he's an awesome actor, and the music just adds to this whole ambiance you're feeling. Eventually, like I said before, I really do need to watch Peaky Blinders, and now that I believe the Dark Knight trilogy is all on HBO Max, I should rewatch those, especially my personal favorite, which might be controversial, in Batman Begins. Look, I love me some Liam Neeson. Cillian Murphy's great. The first one is, for me, sensational. They're all good, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people would probably say Dark Knight's their favorite. I gotta give it to Batman Begins for me personally. Is that a hot take that you're not about? Let me know on social. I'd love to have a healthy dialogue about it with ya. But who knows? Maybe Batfleck and the rest of the Justice League crew can be redeemed in the highly anticipated 4-hour HBO Max Snyder Cut dropping on March 18th. Mark your calendar. I already did. It's locked and loaded in the Google Calendar. Cannot wait for it. For sure, that will be something we'll be discussing at some point or another. But for how zombie movies go, seeing Naomi Harris in here, OG badass, for sure. The plight of most zombie movies, which you see a little bit in the sequel here, is when things go wrong. Someone is either emotional or sentimental and can't pull the trigger, or someone who is turning or bitten, they are going to hide it, and the person who is emotional when it gets too late, they can't get it done, and then it spreads, and that's how the issue comes. That's normally what's the case. But in this movie, in this moment when you've only met 3 people really, one of them gets bit and she immediately takes him out. And it's not like the taking him on a date thing. She takes him out, takes him out, hey, oh, like that. And like, it's not a whole he gets bit on the arm. She's not cutting off a ligament to stop the spread. She kills the heck out of him. And that's that. I think of Cillian when I think of this movie, no doubt. But I super think of Brendan Gleeson. His intro in this, awesome. Not unlike the intro of T-Dog and Morales in the first season of The Walking Dead. What a season the first season was. Real short, but amazing. Wish I had more John Bernthal and Shane, but we've talked about that to a degree already, so we'll get past that. But in this movie, Gleeson is so fun and friendly, and he brings a joy and different character relationship here. First, you have 2 lovers that happen by circumstance, and follow that by an actual family relationship of father and daughter, and seeing how these function and inevitably eventually fail is amazing and heartbreaking. The grocery store scenes and zombie things always make me so happy. It's a blast to see what people would pick up in the craziness of it all. Well, maybe not the World War Z one. That's still in hectic day 1 zombie issues mode. But here it's a fun, everyone's having a ball, just to not only return to some normalcy, but actually something that, given the circumstances, would be wild and fun. If you could run around the store and get whatever you want, you would do it in a heartbeat. That's the whole premise of Supermarket Sweep, which is coming back, or was back, last year in 2020 with Leslie Jones as the new host on ABC. Haven't seen it, I just know it exists. It is weird watching this now, where this invented a lot of what we now see as standard story beats, but seeing the beauty of nature, here a pack of wild horses roaming free, Walking Dead, the buck in the wild scene, or in the first episode where you see another horse. Just those moments of niceness are so quickly lost, and you as a viewer are just waiting for things to go wrong, like so quickly on a dime, like that. And look, I don't know a whole lot of zombie movies where everything just works out in the end. That kind of defeats the purpose last time I checked. In the end of the day, Zombieland in general, those are both pretty happy movies, but this is not that. You knew either the daughter or father was going to die here. Family stories rarely exist in either zombie movies or Disney movies. The full family never makes it out to the end of either the one-off movie or the franchise, with everyone kicking on all cylinders and still good to go. Pretty much, like I said, Zombieland. And even then, it's not a family, it's an adoptive family who make it, but your main 4 casted characters make it through the whole thing, even though it seems a little touch and go there for a bit. But of course, that's every movie, right? Sadly, good things don't last here, and either a pipe dream for hope or carelessness, and the emotional tie at times, it's a weakness. And sadly, this leads to the death of Mad Eye Moody, getting some zombie virus in his eye. Heartbreaking. This is one of those movies where the virus travels, I think, through animals to a degree, because it starts with, I think it's either gorillas or monkeys, and I don't think the bird had the disease or the rat had the disease, because there's a part where there's rats all over the one girl and she doesn't get it. So I think it's just an animal in this instance picking at a guy who had the virus. He's dead, and that is, the blood's still floating around, and lo and behold, that's how it happens. But his death scene is just, his infection is brutal, with it being such an accident. And, the eventual military arrival is just a little too late to save him before it happens. It's not The Mist late, where it's that bad, but it's close. And the sad, somber instrumental music really helps add to these moments. Not unlike last week's media viewing in The Haunting of Hill House, where I still listen to some of those songs on my Spotify, my oldies playlist. While the trend is similar here of corrupt military men, it doesn't make it any less good. Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and many more have this trope. Walking Dead actually has the military only shown once and taken advantage of. They're on the losing end of the stick by an independent group of the governor's folks in season 3. No exception here. It's not the government in any of these, but instead, these movies show that at the end of the day, people are people, no matter their affiliation, and circumstances will make things happen. You can only last so long in stressful situations on constantly feeling it. And these movies show all about how these times and stress can corrupt anyone and everyone. Well, most at least. Our heroes are normally the ones who don't slip into those vices. The whole reason Frodo is the lead in Lord of the Rings and not Boromir of that franchise, as much as I love Sean Bean, he may not be the most physically strong, but he has the will and purity of heart, or mostly enough anyway. Look, and there's a whole thing I read about where not Ned Stark, Boromir, the other Sean Bean character with the sword and long hair, he actually gets corrupted because the sword had Sauron's essence of it, because that's the part that cut him up, and he touched the sharp part, and he was fine up until that happened, and that's why he's all corrupt, which is a very interesting thing. I like that. At the end of the day, Boromir is going to be my favorite character in Lord of the Rings. I know that's the hottest of takes, probably harder than the Batman Begins one, but you can't help it. I love Sean Bean, Boromir, Ned Stark, Alec Trevelyan, name more characters. I can't wait to see Snowpiercer now that I know he's in season 2 and barely in season 1, I guess, but season 2 must be his big coming out party. But enough about Sean Bean. When you think of, things where the military's in a good place in these movies, in this genre, really it's just Shaun of the Dead, and they're briefly featured there, and World War Z have the military as clearly on the side of, I don't want to say good, because really it's just the side of humanity, which is good enough, I guess. One of the guys in this movie is good, at least in the military, but he does not make it, as to be expected, as the one trying to play by the rules guy compared to everybody else. That's how it works. If you are one of those who does not love the slow burn, here's something you may not love, this movie as a whole. I like a good build-up to a wild third act, and when they do get to the chill with the military part of it, the clearly the final third, the end is crazy. The eventual military men's need for female companionship, and the whole man becoming the biggest enemy, bigger than the zombies. The trope is here on full display, and it's truly horrific. But seeing Killian come in die-hard-ish, taking them out one at a time, it's not as fun as some Hans Gruber things, but it's just more brutal and gross. I mean, in all the right ways. Not gross, but, it's a little gory. It's sensational to see and watch his handiwork and get something similar enough to justice, at least. We could say justice and revenge. And there's the big question of what's one and if one's dispassionate. There's some movie that has that might be even a Batman animated series Two-Face thing. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen those. I really do like how at the end of 28 Days Later, you could think Killian is part of the Rage Monster group, but he was really just trying to get back and save those he has grown to care about. in this crazy apocalypse hellscape they're living in. Getting mixed up sometimes. Gotta love a good eye-crushing scene. Not Game of Thrones Pedro Pascal good, but still very good. If you're bored and want to be re-scarred by his death scene, the internet sensation that is Pedro Pascal, give it a go on YouTube. I did it, and it's still harrowing and eye-opening. Really mind-blowing. There's my puns for the episode. You're welcome. But yeah, in short, with two separate ends, there's a nice one and the somber one. The one we see in the actual movie has a group of 3 killing the final military people, Jim, who is Cillian Murphy, getting shot, waking up later on, similar to the beginning, and while all 3 are living their best life in a quaint cottage, the end is hopeful that all 3 are seemingly going to be saved by a fighter jet of the government. Once again, the government should be fine. That's an isolated group of military people who are bad in the last part of this movie, all in the backscape of the beautiful English countryside, and some really hopeful music to boot. There is some fun alternative endings, which are a bit more somber, where he dies in the hospital instead, having a full circle story, which is great in its own right, but in this case, I kind of like the happier one. I actually never saw the third end until yesterday, and it's not complete, but it's super similar to the first one, minus Cillian Murphy. So not really sure if they would have just combined ending 2 and 3. You could end it on a really somber note, end it on a slightly somber note, but it was nice to see them all just to get the full gist. I don't hear a lot of people talk a whole lot about 28 Weeks Later. It wasn't available on a streaming service like 28 Days was whenever I watched it. It doesn't have the same response. I am convinced some people may not even know it exists, which is a shame, since it may be different, but I also quite like this movie. The actors list here is more exciting for me personally, with Robert Carlyle from Once Upon a Time, Rose Byrne from the recent X-Men movies, Jeremy Renner from The Avengers, or The Town, your call pending on where you live. If you're a Massachusetts person like me, you might say The Town over the Avengers franchise. Who knows? Idris Elba from literally everything. I'm always surprised discovering his back catalog of movies, not unlike his appearance in Prometheus, which we fairly recently talked about, and Harold Perrineau from the Matrix 2 and 3 movies, as well as a short-lived but amazing NBC one-season show, Constantine. So a lovely cast in short. We'll see if he's in Matrix 4. I don't know if I saw him on the cast list, but Constantine, we don't even want to talk about if they're going to ever do that, because they should, but they may end the run with Legends of Tomorrow. We'll see. It did just get renewed for another season. Off the bat, I love, once again, relevant to know, the whole absurdity of being asked how you're doing or if you're okay or all right. In the real world today, no one is any of those things or has been for quite some time. And it's nice to see some representation of what we're going through in film. You don't think you'd be able to relate to a pandemic, right? But lo and behold, that's what we are doing. This film's things happen quicker, maybe a bit more viscerally as well. And the filming, if it bugged you last time, it's done on higher quality cameras here. But man, I love how the intro kicks off here. It goes from introducing us to a lovely, fun enough group of characters doing apocalypse fun, and maybe they're getting a little annoyed of each other, but, that's how it is. And one random kid, he comes on and joins in the house for a hot second, and one thing leads to another, and everyone is pretty quickly killed off in an action-packed wild ride of carnage and lovely set-piece moments, which this franchise has loads of. The movie's news setup, which while text-driven unfortunately for a time, says how in general things are all working out well enough in the main city, the Americans, aka Renner, and life has been resuming as well as can be. And we know things aren't going to go well in the countryside. We saw it already. But it is only a matter of time before things go sour in the city as well. And look, if, Cillian Murphy and Naomi Harris weren't picked up, they're in the countryside. Hopefully they got picked up and they're all right as rain, because we do not know what happened to them. And, having a kid initially in the beginning of this movie ruined things for people, and that's a little hard to put on them, but, they were doing just fine enough without that kid. And then when the kid came, it didn't go so well. Especially in knowing that things with kids normally are a problem cause in this genre. Sometimes unintentionally, but in this case, totally their fault at times. We will get there. Also, seeing people en masse, just normalizing things that we live these days. Sadly, we never really get to see what happens to Killian or Naomi. Not sure if we needed to, but it feels like it would have been a hoot to have them seen in the background or something, somewhere at least. What could have been, I guess. Crazy thing here, somehow British AF actor Idris Elba became the most American General Stone ever. It's fine, just wild that the British actor could not be British in a British zombie movie taking place in London. Who knows? We are reintroduced to the dad who got away from the horrors of that cottage zombie attack, and I honestly forgot that he made it out. I thought he was a zombie from that point on. Clearly not. And his cowardice here is definitely reminiscent of, for us ABC or watching on Disney Plus now, fans of his character traits once you get to know how Rumpelstiltskin became who he was in that Once Upon a Time show that we've talked about a few times here. Harold and Jeremy have some amazing fun chemistry together, and it's nice to see the military side of things in one of these without being entirely toxic or corrupt, and showing them as people, keeping a watchful eye without being problematic. It's crazy how almost immediately, once they're safe and sound in this very nice and lovely, protected enough version of London, the first two kids brought back into this new haven of zombie-free living, which apparently was a big no-no because no one asked them about it. They're breaking out and causing a ruckus, and of course they put things in jeopardy and ruin it all. Once again, clear trope of the genre, but it is really only partially explained. They really are the worst in this movie, at least in the beginning. And don't get me wrong, them exploring broken London, it's as amazing and beautiful as the first movie. You're just blown away a bit by how dumb they are and why they do it. If there is one takeaway I always have from this movie, kids can be super dumb and kind of at times in The Walking Dead too, especially in horror or stressful situations. In The Walking Dead, Dale died, who was great portrayed by Jeffrey DeMunn, because Carl was running around with a loaded gun trying to be Mr. Big Shot, and it didn't work so well. Think the beginning of A Quiet Place, for another example. One of many. Kind of makes you think of that Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? There's too many of them seen. If you know, you know. They do somehow end up finding their mom living in their old home, and something is not quite right with her, but hey, have her, I guess. Why not? Besides the crazy family drama of abandoning your wife to die, and she's totally fine and available, and now you have to deal with that, not great. The kids are bad, but giving this guy, this vulnerable guy who we've already seen, and look, we can relate zombies, you're going to try to get out of there for the most part, but it's, giving this guy keycard access to seemingly everything. I know what his job is. He's like a maintenance guy. He powers all the lights or something. But giving him access to everything, not so good. The military also screwed up a bit here. All these areas should have been a bit more secure with soldiers and such. And there's only so many you can cover. But if you have some new crazy, potentially sick person, put someone on the door. I mean, they did see the kids out there and they did get them eventually. But, I don't know. The military, for the most part, did a good job, but not so good in that part, clearly. It doesn't seem like our wife, who's not dead but brought back, I think when I watched, I wasn't sure if it was malicious or not, that she infected Carlisle here. But when I watched again, there's zero chance. He felt terrible about what he did. She seemed pretty forgiving, all things considered, and that kiss was a kiss of death. She didn't know it, but she was a carrier for it, and he did get infected, and it happening at all, crazy. So he ends up his arc, not only abandoning her, but killing her after she pretty much forgives him. I mean, she actually gives him the rage virus. That's not her fault, but who knows? And apparently, the defining thing in these movies, if there's one thing, it's apparently eye-hole finger popping. It's like the staple trend of this franchise, like cheesy one-liners in Marvel movies. Not sure how it became that. Clearly is, especially because it happens not once, but multiple times in this movie. The big question is, whose fault is the downfall of London, right? What's that movie? London is Falling, right? With Gerard Butler and Aaron Eckhart, I think. I really thought it was the kids' fault at first. But lo and behold, The husband messed up in the beginning, and he screwed things up for this whole place just the same. The whole time was, I gotta think it's in the military is a little bit at fault too, but you gotta think he's more so the worst of the worst here. Also, every time in any type of movie like this, horror, slasher, whatever you want to call it, anytime I hear the "I'll be right back" line, I give Scream more and more credit for being spot on, hilarious, and on the nose accurate with all these tropes of the genre. I'll call it Scream 5, but 2022 Scream is going to be amazing, or it better be. And I have high hopes for Jack Quaid in that coming off of his sophomore season of The Boys. And look, we have everyone back, right? The OG trilogy in Arquette, Cox, and Campbell. And I'm very excited for all that. We've talked about a few other things where we're not sure if Hayden Panettiere is going to be back or Randy's sister, who we briefly saw in the third one, and Detective Sheriff Hicks is back too. So I'm very excited for seemingly mostly everyone being back, minus a few loose ends. And 2022 cannot come soon enough for my Scream fix that I'm in desperation mode for. Also, watching this, I really thought they had great protocols in place for when they do have to eventually lock everything down. But if one zombie guy can bust open a door and infect everyone inside this locked subway area, things must not be that good. And one chain and padlock does not equal good security either. You wonder what went wrong here. Thankfully, that one kid got wise when he was locked in that and chilled in the air vent for a while. Seeing the chaos fully erupt onto the streets is amazing. And I love that it shows what you would think with the military, what they would do trying to only target the infected. But as expected, when things go to hell, there's no real way to tell who is who. Especially here when the infected aren't clear zombies. You know, they're blue or green or purple and they have a jaw muscle that's attached by like one side of the bone and like, you know, clear zombies, right? This is not that. And we still have Renner being the good guy here and only targeting the infected, or so it seems at least. I thought he targeted people on the roof when I first watched this to save civilians, but that's not happened, and that's fine. I, for some reason, thought that was the case. That happens later on. I did like that you really don't know who the main character is in this movie. It can't be the kids. It's definitely not the zombie dad. It could be Renner, but it clearly is not by the end of the film. So it's either no one or Rose Byrne, and even when you watch a little later, it probably isn't her either. You know, she's a military person, but also a geneticist, and you would have assumed, clearly enough, that this eye mutation must be something with the cure. The same thing as in World War Z, with crazy diseases being the cure to the zombie virus wanting nothing to do with you. But for me, Renner is easily the most standout of the movie. And while not always the case, zombie movies don't always want to keep the most capable around. Strength and skills don't always get you through to the end of a horror movie. That is why the football jock or the biker gang member, or gang as a whole, if you count that one Halloween movie. No, that's a Friday the 13th movie. That's Friday the 13th Part 3. Now I gotta check. It was Part 3. I knew it. It doesn't get you out of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers' wrath. That is why it has to be the unassuming innocent bystander. These movies are all about allegories for sin and vice, and for the most part, only the purest of people make it out alive. Not saying that's exactly exclusively the case here, but worth bringing up in my opinion. And it's my podcast after all, so I can say whatever I want. But this is the kind of stuff we like to see, since it's pretty rare to see the outbreak, happening and all the craziness going on. Like I said, the only one I can really think of is World War Z, seeing it actually happening. And a little bit in Fear the Walking Dead Season 1, a little bit. I mean, you see the city craziness in the first season of Walking Dead as well. But here, seeing the napalming happening as up close and personal as can be, you see more so the aftermath or it happening in the distance in Walking Dead in one of the scenes that's kind of a flashback in Season 1. Fear the Walking Dead definitely had it a bit, but it was briefly over, and the show reinvented itself to just be another story in the universe of The Walking Dead, which was still very good. And I want to see my society falling stuff. That stuff's awesome. We do see that for sure in the World War Z movie where, there's crimes happening and people are just trying to survive and find a way to make it through, and crazy stuff happens in that early scene in World War Z, and I'm all about it. I know the book is very, very good and probably better than the movie, but I do really like the movie. But most just pick up right after the thing has already happened. As I'm recording this, I keep telling myself I need to rewatch Train to Busan again. I don't always like to read my movies, but that, Lagan, Om Shanti Om, all super worth it. Crazy different movies, zombie versus classic Bollywood, but they're all great in their own right. If there is one for sure thing here, it's how, surprisingly, I don't get it, how Robert Carlyle's zombified dad character can somehow constantly find his kids. He continues to survive everything. He somehow doesn't walk into the napalm and he's just sitting. I don't know if that just took me out of it. Is he the smartest zombie to ever exist? I don't know. That part always, I just didn't fully get it. It's fine and it's cool. It feels a little, I don't know, extraneous, supernatural, where, as I said, I like my zombie things. There's zombies, there's not zombies. There's also spiders as big as houses, or, there's also ice demons and zombies too. I mean, I hear that's the issue with True Blood, which I've only seen one season, but I hear they just keep adding fantasy creatures and throw them in there. Maybe it gets a little lost in it. Also, as amazing as a scene with the helicopter chopping up zombies is, we really do constantly see how great of a guy Renner is, seemingly, his character in this. I know I talk about this all, while I sadly know what happens next, but this is my biggest problem with this movie. He dies, and in a brutal way, saving the day, but being burned alive while pushing a car out. Now you watch this thinking there's no way he's going to die when he's like, I'll get out and push. You think he's going to do it and save the day. You think he's probably, the next Cillian Murphy of the franchise. But he does die. He gets burned alive. The kids watch him. He's saving them and he's flailing around. He's burned. This movie takes a bit of a turn here once he dies, for the worse. Not unlike when Bradley Cooper kills Ryan Gosling in A Place Beyond the Pines. And he has a gun with ammo, seemingly. I don't think there's I'm out of ammo moment. How does he not shoot all these people up? I have so many questions about how this could have gone down or why he had to die. I really did think this was his movie. Clearly not. From a cinematic perspective and a stress part, I absolutely love the scene shot entirely in night vision, night scope. Super cool and different, trying to find your way around things, and Rose Byrne, who's now the lead adult, is trying to guide kids through this through a rifle scope. It's so stressful. Holy hell. It's amazing to watch, but it's just mad anxiety inducing. And I actually totally forgot that Rose Byrne died here, right after that moment. So they kill off the two adults pretty quickly here. And the kids actually are the only two to make us out of this. Well, that and the pilot, which was a bit surprising, honestly. And Idris Elba, but he was grossly underused here. And once things go sideways and he watches it all with all his cameras, which that was an effect they used here with security cameras, he's sad about it, and that's sort of the end of his character. We don't know what happens to him. That's it. In the end, we see a lasting shot of zombie folks in the Eiffel Tower. No clue where the threat is going next, beside, Paris, France. But no clue if we'll see any of our 5 to 6 survivors in any movies back at it again. It is different from 28 Days Later, and you can obviously watch one without the other here. And if you like more standard zombie movies and more action, this might be better suited for you. But both are awesome in their own right, and if we get more entries, that would be swell. Watch them all. So the future holds some excitement. It's brief and kind of, you're not hearing a whole lot about it. It's barely there, not unlike the Harry Potter HBO series that's briefly discussed, but not really a whole lot is known about it. And here there's potential for a third movie titled 28 Months Later. As late as the summer of 2019, talks had existed. So we don't know if COVID has shifted those talks. Obviously, the entertainment industry, like most industries, have taken a hit in this time. Except for maybe Zoom's doing phenomenally in Teams, I would imagine, this time. But I would be cool with at least one more. Especially if they somehow had Cillian back and ended with a trilogy. The first one came out in 2002, and this latest one was in 2007. So it's been a while, but long-term, split-up sequels are all the rage these days. If I had to rank these two, it'd be impossible to put 28 Weeks Later anywhere other than under 28 Days Later. That has to be first. But hopefully I have convinced you there's nothing wrong with the sequel. It's a good movie on itself, and you can easily enjoy both, and you should. I just did them both in a day. Very easy to do with 2 movies. And who knows, if the third one's any good, you could always do 28 years later eventually and really cap it off with the fourth and final film, because you're not going past 28 years, I would imagine. So that's the episode. Do you feel a bit seen as the therapy talk in me comes out by this zombie apocalyptic duology, or the zombie genre as a whole during this crazy time we're living in? If so, let me know what you thought of this or any in that niche genre of horror film. The lines are open, folks, on social, either Knickknack Movies or Knickknack_IC on both Twitter and Instagram. Share your zombie and quarantine movie takes, woes, and just have life chats. The best things can be shared on next week's episode, so get a little shout out. How about that? Would love to make a mailbag segment, so let's get that rolling, folks. Well, that's it for me. Back to Sabrina it is. Also, I super can't wait for that 5th season of The Expanse, so I can now watch it in full on Amazon Prime soon enough as well. Well, cheers, folks, and until next time, you cinephiles, you. Are you not entertained? I think this is gonna be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.